let's go over some of the latest updates from around Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids fireworks reminder for residents. It's official, setting off fireworks in Grand Rapids is against city ordinance now that summer holidays are behind us. Violating the ordinance could cost you a $1,000 fine per offense. In Grand Rapids Fire Department news, they're sounding the alarm about multiple recent fires involving lithium-ion batteries, mostly from e-bikes, scooters, and hoverboards, underscoring the dangers of improper use and storage. The city has some safety tips, including using UL-tested devices, manufacturer-approved chargers, charging in ventilated spaces away from flammables and exits, unplugging promptly, and never using damaged or swelling batteries. City arborists have identified 18 oak trees at Almond Park infected with oak wilt, a disease that impacts oak trees. The affected trees are being girdled and herbicide is being applied directly into the cuts to halt fungal spread via root systems. Residents are being reminded to avoid pruning or moving firewood between April 1 and July 31 when beetles that spread the disease are most active. And Grand Rapids has become one of Michigan's first cities to achieve platinum level certification from the Michigan Green Communities Program. Platinum status rewards leadership in areas like increasing tree canopy coverage, waste diversion, energy efficiency, climate resilience, and mobility, acknowledging the city's strong sustainability momentum. And after 23 years of service, City Attorney Anita Hitchcock has announced her retirement, effective in September 2025. She joined the office in 2002 and has led since 2016, overseeing 17 attorneys and playing a key role in initiatives like police reform. The City Commission will soon begin the process to appoint her successor. And the beloved annual dog swim event at Richmond Park Pool has been canceled indefinitely due to mechanical issues, in particular dog fur clogging the filtration system, stressing the pump, and contributing to prior breakdowns that we saw earlier this summer. Interim Parks and Rec Director Laura Claypool emphasized the need to prioritize safe, reliable operation for human visitors, especially after the pool season was delayed for multiple days earlier this summer. That's it for city updates. When we come back from the break, we'll be joined by Grand Rapids Mayor David LaGrande.
For over 30 years after humble beginnings as a public access TV station, the Community Media Center has grown to be an active, multi-platform media and technology assistance organization, encouraging and enabling our community to push their creative boundaries. We power a variety of resources, including a music-centered community radio station, WYCE, a community venue with stage and screen at Wealthy Theater, citizen-driven journalism with the Rapidian, a web development team empowering local nonprofits, an education department that trains and broadens students' minds, and a free speech public access television studio, GRTV, where it all began. By introducing audiences to new voices and ideas, we enhance community engagement and create connections between artists and audiences, enriching our city's cultural offerings. We empower and collaborate with platforms and resources accessible to all and used by all. Every free democratic society depends on media, accessible to the community and uncensored by government. The Community Media Center continues this work for the media landscape of today and tomorrow. These platforms and services empower our neighbors to tell their stories and explore the richness of culture that Grand Rapids has to offer. Connect, discover, learn, create, and share. The Grand Rapids Community Media Center.
Welcome back to City Connection. I'm your host, Allison Donahue, joined today by Mayor David LaGrande to continue our conversation. Welcome back to City Connection. Thanks for coming on. This month, we're focusing the conversation around housing, specifically around accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. Trying my best at defining those.
Yep.
A small secondary unit built on the same property as a main house. And I understand it can be a garage unit, or above a garage, basement, an extra building out back. Is that a pretty good definition?
Good summary, yep.
Cool.
Or an addition, if you threw an addition on your house to do it, right? That would be another way to do it, yep.
Great, yeah, so we will jump into some ADU specific questions, but just to kick us off, what has the last month looked like in Grand Rapids? I know
Sure.
with your work as mayor on the city commission, have there been big projects you guys have been discussing?
Well, I'm hoping, and this is one of the things that we're doing at Mayor's Mondays too, is to keep iteratively having discussions about the big basket issues. And so I've had some really good discussions, and I think we're seeing progress on cycling and pedestrian things, and there's a lot of things in that space we could talk about some other time, but real progress we're making there. We're making real progress, I think, on conversations about how to do policing better and justice better in the city, and that's exciting. So one of the conversations I've been kicking off is the city has a lot of things that we charge. They're low-level crimes, and the word for those is misdemeanors. Mm-hmm. And I really want to have a conversation about do all those things that are in that basket, do they need to be crimes? So if you want to discourage something, you can discourage it without making it a crime.
Do you have an example?
Sure, speeding.
Okay.
Speeding, if you get a speeding ticket, you didn't commit a crime. You got a civil infraction. You have to pay a fine, but there's no discussion if you're going 30 miles an hour in a 25 zone in the city, there's no possibility you go to jail for that. Mm-hmm. Now, if you're reckless driving, that gets to crimes, right? If you're doing crazy things when you're driving, but generally, if you're going over the speed limit, we all know, oh, I got a ticket, that just means I got to pay money. Mm-hmm. Another great example would be parking. If I park in the wrong zone at the wrong time, nobody throws me in jail. Mm-hmm. They make me pay money. So that's how I do penance for that mistake I made, right? So there are other mistakes that we make that I don't think need to be a crime. So for example, jaywalking. If you want to say jaywalking's bad, people shouldn't do it, great. Do I think any citizen should have to do 90 days in jail because they jaywalked? No, I don't think most people would. So the question then is, so it's time we have that conversation about, do we need as many things that we call crimes in the city, or can we have how can we encourage good behavior in the city with things that are fines? They're called, the fancy word is civil infractions. So could we have more civil infractions and maybe fewer misdemeanors in the city?
So
and that's a conversation I've been kicking off.
Yeah, is that conversation happening with the city commission or with GRPD? Who really
Everybody,
makes that decision?
all kinds. So we're having it out in the community at Mayor's Mondays, having it with the city commission, with my fellow commissioners, having it with the city manager and city staff, having it with GRPD and the officers in GRPD. So all of those, you don't have to have those conversations one after the other after the other. It's not as though, this is you're running something up to the Supreme Court. It's something that obviously affects lots of different people, and so you want to get as many, I don't like the word stakeholders, but let's say people who care about that issue.
Businessy.
Well, but also like we're all stakeholders in everything, right? So do I have to prove that I have some stake in something? I mean, in a democracy, we all should have a voice on these issues, right?
Yeah.
I shouldn't have to prove that I've got skin in the game before. I mean, we all have skin in all the game. So I just don't like the word just because it acts like some people have more right to talk about things than other people do, and I kind of resist that narrative. But anyway.
Yeah, great. As we're on the topic of housing this month, one thing, I think you have a really unique perspective as a city official and a local property owner, and I'm often hearing people talk about rent prices. So I just want to hear your perspective on how you view the role of landlords in keeping rental prices accessible in Grand Rapids. Because I know that in Michigan we don't have like rent caps or stabilized rent.
So to pull it back a little bit, it's very closely analogizable to saying, what roles do grocery stores have in keeping the price of milk down? Well, you know, if Myers is paying the dairy farmer $2 a gallon, they're not going to stay in business very long if they sell milk for $1.98, unless it's a loss leader, right? But let's say they're just a milk store. Well, they've got to make their costs plus the cost of the milk, right? So landlords are buying property in town, and property has price, right? Like houses cost, apartment buildings also cost. So there are costs involved. Or if you build a new one, there are costs involved in building. And all of those costs they're really part of so then who's consuming that product? The renter, right? Nobody else is living in that apartment, the renter is. The landlord's not living in it, right? So if you think of it as sort of like milk, you're not having a productive conversation. If we all went to Myers and said, make milk $1, like, okay. But if they're paying the dairy farmer $2, you can be as mad as you want about it, but they're never going to sell you milk for less than $2.
Right.
So for me, one of the things we have to remember is cost of construction completely relates to cost of renting. And in an environment where anybody can look at gas. If gas right now is selling for, I don't know what it sells for because I drive electric cars, but let's pretend it's $3 a gallon. I could be totally wrong on that. I don't know what it sells for right now. Let's say it's $3 a gallon. Drive around the city, there's not going to be any gas station that sells it for $4 a gallon because you'll go somewhere else. And there's not going to be anybody that sells it for $2 a gallon because they'll lose money, right? So that is how a functioning market works. Now in the city of Grand Rapids, we got tens of thousands of rental units. And if you don't like my price, you can go to another landlord. If you don't like his price, you can go to another landlord. So the idea that landlords are keeping the prices high, well, if they did, someone would come along and undercut them, just like gas stations. So you can't sell $4 gas. It wouldn't work for you in a world where everyone's selling for $3 a gallon. Now, when prices go high, you really got a couple options. One is you can try to control what makes those prices high, and the other is you can subsidize it. So if you want to subsidize it, then we can take some of our state tax or our city tax and say, hey, you know, the real cost of this apartment is $1,000 a month, but somebody can't afford that, so this, you know, the city, the state will pay a couple $100s a month, and we'll let people rent it for $800 a month. That'd be one thing you could do. The other thing you could do is say, why does this apartment cost $1,000 a month? Well, if the property taxes on it are $300 a month, and the utility costs are $150 a month, and the cost of the apartment to construct it was $300 a foot, and that means it costs you know, it's a 1,000 square foot apartment, and that means the carrying cost of the mortgage on having built it, right? Like we know how much mortgages cost. So if you got to make all those costs, there's a limit to how cheap that place can be. So then the question is, can you build cheaper? Property tax. So that's one of the things that unfortunately the state does really, really wrong from my perspective, is we make people who own their house pay half as much property tax as people who rent. That is messed up. I can't fix that as the mayor of Grand Rapids, but the fact that we subsidize middle-class people and overtax poor people is deeply messed up, because you can say you're taxing the landlord, but he passes it along to the renter, just like Myers passes along the price of milk. You kind of have to, unless you want to go out of business. So So I don't know that landlords have a huge role in reducing the cost of rent, because they are basically, there's a lot of units out there, a lot of landlords renting them, and if they tried charging more, someone else could come along and charge less and undercut them, like that $4 gas thing. Who really has the responsibility of affordable housing is us, the community. And we can either do one of two things, and we can do both. One is we can say these apartments are reserved for people making half the area income, or median income, or 80% of median income, or 20% of the area median income, or whatever. But then we're going to have to subsidize. We're going to have to put some of our tax dollars in to make that equation match. Or we can say, why, for example, do we require for that every apartment we build or rent has to have 2 parking units for it? Like, I biked here, I bike everywhere. You don't need, if I would way rather rent an $800 apartment with no parking than a $1,000 apartment with 2 parking spots. I don't need 2 parking spots. But those parking spots are expensive, and so they get bundled into the cost of your rent. You can't give somebody a free parking spot. Well, then if we have those parking requirements, it stops us making more affordable housing. So that's one example. Or all the things that we do. Every time you put a regulation on construction or on housing, you're adding to the expense, and then guess who pays it? The renter. At the end of the day, there's no free lunch. You can't say, oh, landlords should pay that, as though landlords have this pile of extra money any more than Myers has a pile of extra money, or a gas station has a pile of extra money. What happens in an open market is people sell it just above the level that they're going to go out of business at. If they sell a little below that, they're going to go out of business. And everybody else, ice cream stores, Myers, gas stations, landlords, they're all kind of doing the same thing. And so if we went to our local ice cream shop and demanded that they sell ice cream cones for half what they're selling for, they could try that, they would probably go out of business. And if there was somebody down the street selling them for half the price, we'd all go there. So all of those things, I mean, you don't go to a shoe store and feel like, oh wow, everyone else is selling Nikes for $100, but you're selling them for 50. Like, they're not going to stay in business very long doing that. So that's, an open market, which is really what we have in real estate. There's not like one landlord in Grand Rapids, there are thousands of them. And so in just like gas stations, if anybody can get into the business, all you got to do is buy one rental unit and you're a landlord. Then prices really get the margins get pretty thin in that space. So mostly what we, the city, have to do is fix regulation, get rid of regulation that we don't need, so we can drive down costs, and then decide where we want to help people who just can't help with what's available right now. So we have to do both. We have to subsidize, but we also have to get rid of dumb regulations.
And that feeds into the whole ADU conversation, because that's
Sure does.
A lot of what those changes were last spring 2024. We're relaxing those ADU restrictions. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those changes were?
Sure. So the big change, which is great, was it laid the table and said, you can now take your garage, say, and convert it into a studio apartment behind your house. Now, a couple things about that. One is, that's not York Creek Apartments. That's not some big multi-million-dollar company, right? That's somebody who's got a garage in their backyard, and they could be a landlord of a 1-unit building. They can have one tenant, that's it, and that would be easy. So it's an imaginable way to get into wealth building, because a lot of people think owning a house is wealth building. I mean, in the same way maybe that owning a car is wealth building, like it's an asset that you own. But a rental unit is like opening a gas station, or like maybe you can make some money renting. Now the advantage that it opens up for us for affordability is, if you look around Grand Rapids, there's garages all over the place. They already have walls, they already have a roof, and they already have a floor. So you're a long way away towards making that housing. So permitting that to happen is the first part. The next part is getting rid of barriers so it sounds good, but we need to get rid of a lot of the barriers that actually make it hard. Because last year, even though there were tens of thousands of garages in Grand Rapids, only 8 permits were pulled for accessory dwelling units. Now we need tens of thousands of new units of housing in Grand Rapids, 8 is a very small part of 10,000.
The
So
last number
we need a lot more.
I saw was 12,000 by 2027. Is that still where we are?
That sounds right.
Yeah.
So 8 divided, 12,000,
Yeah.
into 8, that's a lot. We'd need what? What? 1,500 years worth of ADUs at that rate. It will take us 1,500 years to get up to that. Now, I think we could have hundreds and maybe even thousands of ADUs quite easily. But when you get into the what's required problem, you find that you've got financing problems. Very few people in Grand Rapids, like it's happening more, that people come up and just buy a house for cash. But most of us, I have a mortgage. I didn't go to the bank and I didn't go to the person selling the house that Melissa and I live in and say, here's a pile of $20 bills. I went to the bank and I got 80% of the cost of buying that house as a loan. And I had saved up some money, but 80% of it came from a bank. Now, if I want to make an ADU in my backyard and it's going to cost $100,000, most people don't have $100,000 sitting around their house in a cookie jar. Most people are going to need to save up some of it, but then go to a bank and say, hey, can you loan me for that? Well, if banks are set up to lend for houses, they know how to do that. They don't really have programs yet set up for lending for ADU construction. And so one of the things we've got to do is have conversations with banks like, hey, if we're going to do this, we're going to need lending. How can we make that happen? What problems do you see? What risks do you see? And start that conversation with banks. Another thing is, I went into is the question of what kind of foundation you need. Now, my garage is 120 years old. One of the in code, we require foundations to have what are called frost walls. You're supposed to dig down below the frost level, which is 42 inches down, and put your foundations below that. Why? Because if you don't, things move a little bit because in the winter freeze-thaw cycles, and so they move around a little bit. And if you built a house without that frost wall foundation, your drywall might crack. My garage is 120 years old. Whatever moving it's going to do, it's probably done in the last 120 years. The bricks are not falling off because of heaving. So I shouldn't have to go prove that I've got a foundation that's good enough under my garage because it's been there for 120 years. So I think one of the things we should have is, look, if your garage has been up for 5 or 10 years, we're not going to fuss around with making you build a new foundation. Because if we make you build a new foundation, what we're really saying is, why don't you go bulldoze your garage and then you can build an ADU? Well, the whole point is to capture the value we've already got in garages. It's not the whole point. Like if you want to build a new one, knock yourself out. But like, I think 80% of the ADUs in town probably should be coming from converted garages, and we got to make that easy.
So other than relaxing some of the paperwork and restrictions, do you see the city's role at all being incentivizing owners to turn their buildings into ADUs?
Absolutely. I mean, one way we can do that, for example, is we could say, we have homestead property tax exemptions, and we could say, we'll limit the amount of, so if you build an ADU in your backyard, that's not your home anymore, it's a rental unit. So we could say for the first 5 years, we won't increase your property taxes, for example. We could do some kind of property freeze, which would be incentivized. We could say we'll waive the fee for hooking up your sewer or your water. That would be an incentive. And it'd be a way for us to make those even cheaper. And back to my gas station analogy, the cheaper we can make those ADUs, the cheaper we're going to rent them out. So imagine, let's just do the math for the viewers. Imagine you built a $100,000 ADU and you are borrowing your money at 6%. So that means you need to make $6,000 a year to cover your mortgage. Now, what other costs do you got? Well, maybe your insurance goes up a little bit, probably not much. You could make, if you're building a new unit, you can make those people pay their own utilities because they'll have their own utility hookups. So let's say your insurance goes up a couple $100 a year. But basically, $6,000 a year is your break-even point. That's only $500 a month. Good luck finding a one-bedroom apartment in Grand Rapids right now, a brand new apartment, right? New walls, new everything for $500 a month. They're not out there. But if we had enough ADUs, if that rented out for $550, the person who built it would be making money. And they would rent it out for that, and they'd make a profit, and we'd have a brand new, incredibly affordable unit in town. Now, if the city charges you $20,000 to mess around with your foundation and do complicated hookups and all kinds of code stuff, well, then that $20,000 is going on, it's going to make it a $120,000 ADU. So all of a sudden, instead of being able to rent it out for $550 a month, you're going to want to rent it out for $650 a month, and so on and so on, right? So keeping the cost for the person who's doing the construction as low as possible is going to keep rents low. That's just what's going to happen.
It looks like it's time for us to take our break. We can come back and talk a little bit more about ADUs before we take some questions from viewers like you. To take part in the conversation, feel free to send in a question to cityconnection@grcmc.org or submit a question through the Rapidian's Instagram story @the Rapidian. Welcome back to City Connection. It's July 7, 2025, and we're joined here by Mayor David LaGrande. During this part of the show, we'll be taking questions from viewers. I wanted to just wrap up our conversation about ADUs before we answer some from folks. We were talking off break about that fear of the unknown. Do you want to dive into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you talk to people about the idea that there might be renters moving into a garage in their neighborhood, I always say a couple things. One is, yeah, that's potential new friendship or a new neighbor, right? Like, we live in cities because we like people, we like each other, right? And so more people moving into my neighborhood isn't a bad thing. The other thing is, in neighborhoods like mine and like yours, in Heritage Hill, there are people who rent out their garages already. My next door neighbor rents out his garage, has for years. And every single one of the tenants that's moved in there has been a nice, pleasant addition to my life, right? They're nice people, they're people I can say hi to. You know, they move in with dogs and I like dogs. Like, so that's already happening in some neighborhoods, and it's fine, and people like it. And they like having that mix and mash of like young and old and renters and homeowners. Like, it's good. It's an important part of diversity. So it can actually be a way to make a neighborhood more fun. But we can all be a little scared of new things. And so one of the things I'm really hoping is that we'll have some sort of pilots and examples, like, look, somebody in Ottawa Hills did one. Like, I don't know any in Ottawa Hills yet, but once we get 3 or 4 and people have positive experiences, then maybe they'll be like, maybe I could do it. You know, mom and dad are getting older. Maybe because one of the nice things about converting a garage, it's wheelchair accessible. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I mean, most garages are going to be great, accessible, potential age-in-place operations. And so I think there's lots of interesting potential there.
A lot of options. I will also say one perk, if your landlord lives in the unit already or in the house, that's usually a benefit because they care about the yard, they care about that the house is well kept. And I could spend 5 minutes telling you all of my friends who are former renters for me and Melissa. Mm-hmm. Like a great landscape artist who now lives down the block with his wife and their kid. Friends who work for the Rapid, who were renters of mine back in the day. Paul Lee, who just died, who ran the Winchester and Donkey. His wife was one of my former tenants. We became friends that way. So I have this whole funny community of people who used to rent from me, and it's great. Yeah. They become friends. Yeah. Great. Well, let's take some questions from the public. This first one came from Reddit. Why isn't the city working harder with developers to create density downtown, especially housing? Or maybe another way to ask that is, what is the city doing?
That's a better way to ask them. Why are you doing more? Do better. So yes, I am really, really urgent that we develop more housing downtown. There is a lot of exciting stuff happening. So some people may have missed it, but the old, what I still think of as the old Kent building, which became the Fifth Third building, that's going to become housing. The Waters building that I used to work in right across the street used to be all offices. Now it's half offices, half residential. There's another project going in that I know of right now that's going to get converted, going to convert offices into housing downtown. Then there's new build. So there are projects scattered around downtown where new building is actually going to happen. One of the things I'd love to do is see surface parking lots downtown essentially go away, become new housing opportunities. One of the exciting thoughts I have, and that I'm hoping to get somebody to lean into, is we have about 10 to 14,000, I don't know the exact number, but a lot of students going to Grand Rapids Community College. Mm-hmm. Historically I get that most of them commute, that most of them come into that campus. But some of them are going to want to live near campus, and the only options right now are to go up the hill and try to rent something in Heritage Hill. But like if we had some downtown student housing, that would be awesome. Especially as we get the Grand Valley students get better integrated into the city. So if we think of downtown, and I don't think of downtown as ending at the river, I think the west side's part of downtown too. I think there is a lot going on, but there's a lot of potential to do more. Corwell just built some, is in the process of building some housing for some of their employees. There's conversations around various employers about how do they build housing for their employees. So that's exciting. That's happening. So I am very urgent about it. It's one of the things I'm most excited about. Again, I've said before, for me, if the soccer stadium I'll know the soccer stadium has been a success if it stimulates some housing around it. I'll know the amphitheater has been a success if it stimulates some housing building around it. Because if those if they become magnets for new neighborhoods and not just things for people to drive in from outside town and go use. I'm nothing against people driving in from outside town, but my job is to try to make the city really work and awesome for the people who live here, first and foremost. And so if we can, I think those things can be catalysts, because let's be honest, it's tough sell to get somebody to try to live by the 131. That's where the soccer stadium is. But if we manage it, because the soccer stadium's so fun, people want to live around it, hallelujah, that'll be great. Because I'd love to get rid of the 131, but that's a big lift, right? If we can make the 131 like Lakeshore Drive in Chicago, just make it a surface street, that'd be awesome. Get the trucks off it, but I don't know if that's going to happen in the next 12 months. Don't hold your breath.
Yeah, I'm sure it's harder to miss those conversions, or easier to miss those conversions from office space or unused space. But another question from Reddit: many cities which have had great success with ADUs allow DADUs, which is double ADUs, and JADUs. These are new to me. Junior ADUs, small size micro units. Are these types of changes being considered?
Yes, and I guess we didn't really get into the whole ADU thing too much, but one of the things I did a couple months ago was I got a task force together to try to study ways to really get from 8 ADUs a year permits pulled to like 800. Like I really want to knock away some of the barriers, and one of the things is we currently have a minimum size requirement. Now, I've said before, maybe on this show, my son lives in a 300 square foot apartment in Brooklyn. Like he's happy to have 300 square feet in Brooklyn. He's a lawyer. There's right now in Grand Rapids, we have a minimum size for ADUs of 400 square feet. Well, my son's living in less than that in Brooklyn, and it's not killing him. So I don't know why we have a minimum size at all, but that's one of the things we can and I think should fix, is getting rid of that minimum size. Those minimum size things seem to me kind of treat renters like they're infants. Like if you're renting an apartment, you don't go in blindfolded, right? Like you can choose to rent it or not choose to. Like you look at the apartment, you either like it or you don't. If it's a great layout and it's only 250 square feet, I guarantee you 250 square feet is cheaper than 500 square feet. And it's great to say to say everyone should live in a mansion. Well, I don't want people living under bridges. I don't want people couch surfing. And that means we really need to be focusing on those smaller housing sizes. So great question. And I think one of the other things we really need to lean into is more duplexes and more quads in town, because lots of studies show that a duplex costs about as much to build as a single family house, which means the per unit cost is like almost half. So if you're looking for affordability, again, how much did it cost to make it? That's always a key question.
I did have a question, so I hope we get all to all the questions today, but about the task force. Can you talk a little bit about that ADU task force, what they're intended to do, if there's a timeline for their work?
Yeah, we're hoping they're going to come out with some real recommendations. They just started meeting a couple months ago, so in 3 or 4 months, and they're going to be looking at all of these things, and then they're going to give it to the city commission and say, hey, we think you guys should do this, or this, or this. We think you should draw banks in. I don't know what they're going to say. That's the whole point of putting together a task force. So John O'Connor, who is a former city commissioner, is chairing it. John actually was the one who got ADUs. He really led the charge to get ADUs permitted as a thing in Grand Rapids. Then we've got just a variety of people who are really deep in the housing space, and I don't want to. And we've got some city staff involved who are experts on this. And
but it's a mix
I'm sorry.
Of people
yes, yeah. We went through the whole selecting and process. Just so like right now, I happen to still have in my head the name of people who are going to be appointed to the new land bank board, because I just finished figuring out who all those people should be. So if you ask me that, I can tell you. I don't remember who's on the ADU task force.
Fair.
It's sad, but I don't want to get it wrong.
That's okay. It's not a quiz. Another question from Reddit: does the mayor have any comments on the GRPD chief press conference concerning the incident from June 13? A news media outlet put out a video of the different state laws that were incorrectly stated by the chief. The phrase he used during the press conference to the community, quote, comply now, complain later, really is disturbing to hear.
So I will say this. It really is important to comply with police orders. It's really important because in that situation, the police had been called out to a scene where there was an individual who had an assault type rifle, and we now know that because he said so, that he had a bullet in the chamber, and we also know the safety was off, and he was in a parking lot of a business. So the police were responding to that scene. Now, it's their job to try to keep us safe, and we, like it or not, live in a community where you can walk around legally with an assault rifle on the sidewalk. That makes it really hard for the police to keep us safe in an era of mass shootings, which can come out of nowhere. And so it's really important that people don't decide that maybe comply now, complain later is not the way to put it, but it really is true that we've got to give the police the ability to keep us safe and to define perimeters. And like, they're worried about things like, are you standing in the line of fire or not? And like, so all of those things are really a part of the mix. Now, I'm not going to comment on what the chief said. I'm not going to parse the law here for a variety of reasons. But I will say that I think the commission and our city leadership really has a deep commitment to continuously improving policing and the delivery of justice out in the community. And those are long, complicated conversations. And one of the reasons I have Mayor's Mondays and devote a month every 3 months to talking about this is because these are things where we can always do better. And we always have to have honest community conversations about here's an example, could we have done that better? But also, can we imagine ways in which we could do better? So an example I'll give you is it used to be okay for police to do high-speed chases indefinitely through community neighborhoods to catch speeders. Well, the problem with that is it really puts the community at danger, and so a policy that stops that is a good idea. We didn't used to have the policy, now we do. Questions of how the police interact with the public. We're never going to be done with that conversation. That is a tricky, tough conversation. The trick is to really, really never forget that is a complete community conversation. It's not an us versus them conversation. It's not a power versus submission conversation. It is a build a community vision conversation. And from my perspective, as someone who's spent a lot of time thinking deeply about what peacemaking and peacekeeping and problem solving should look like, it's really important to me that we have a community where we are really trying to work towards peace, and we're really trying to work towards supporting each other and not finding ways to fight each other. I mean, I really think a world in which we're collaborating and building each other up is always a better world, in a world where I say, ha, I got something you didn't. Ha, I won over you. I don't want to win, and I don't want to fight. I want to work and I want to build. And I think those are the values we all should have as a community, and we should always be working towards peace. And the positive word we use about policing is peacekeeping. And the good officers I know are always trying to peacekeep. They're always trying to problem solve. They're trying to diffuse tension. They're trying to bring safety, and that should be our vision.
Great. Thank you for that. It's time for us to take another break, so we'll do a speed round with questions on this next one. When we come back, we'll have more questions from the public.
It's morning in Grand Rapids. Do you know what's going on in your city? Stay informed about what's happening in your community with The Rapidian, your source for hyperlocal news and information. The Rapidian is a community-focused news source powered by local residents like you. Our volunteer writers and reporters create content that hits close to home about topics like local government, business, schools, events, and people. The Rapidian goes beyond the headlines to provide in-depth coverage of issues that affect Grand Rapids directly, so you can stay in the know. We aim to uplift the community by sharing positive, inspiring stories of growth, progress, and neighborhood pride. The Rapidian is your neighborhood newspaper for the digital age. Follow us on our website and social media to stay connected to your community. This is The Rapidian.
Welcome back to City Connection. We're joined by Mayor David LaGrande, taking questions from the public. This first question since our break is from Reddit. What can the city do to have a more productive relationship with the Rapid?
Use it more often? Yeah, good. We're doing quick questions. There's my answer.
Yeah, I will accept that answer. I was just thinking about that earlier today, actually. Be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
Another question from Reddit. Can Grand Rapids maybe get a police department that actually helps with the community with things like drag racing downtown, doing donuts on the highway, and guns on 4th of July, instead of having a police department whose only purpose seems to be trying to film a TV show and say things outrageous at press conferences? I will also edit this one a little bit to say, are there things being done specifically around those traffic issues that were mentioned? I know we've had some drag racers in town recently since it's been summertime. I know there were some incidents downtown during the fireworks show or shortly after. What kind of safety conversations are happening between the city and the police department about those?
You know, those are tricky problems because they can be very quick, right? Partly I always want to come back to response times on things like this. So I had a gun pulled on me a couple years ago, and I called GRPD, and the response time was several minutes. Now I don't blame GRPD for that at all. That's a question of how many people do they have out there. Like, I was a high priority call, and it took a while. Well, that was long enough, more than long, plenty. 10 seconds is enough time for me to get shot dead. But in that case, it was long enough for that guy to go off and get rid of the gun. So when somebody's drag racing, think about how long that takes. One of the stats I know is the average fight takes about 10 seconds. So unless you want to assign us all an individual police officer, there are going to be lots of little 10-second fights that nobody catches. There are going to be lots of peeling out incidents where, 3 minutes later the police show up. Like, I have this problem when I'm on the highway all the time. If I see something doing something crazy on the highway, I always call 911. I always tell the dispatch where it is and hope that maybe the state troopers can do something about it. But I know the odds that they're going to find that person are so low. I always try, but it's really, really hard to build a system unless we wanted a cop every half a mile on the highway, which is really expensive, and I also don't really want that. We have to balance how many police officers do we want out in the community, like staring into my yard, and how fast can they respond to things that they don't know in advance are going to happen. It's tricky. So that's just a balancing test.
Moving to the next question from Reddit. Who specifically is overseeing the use of the license plate tracking camera system? Who is our local contact so we can obtain transparent reporting about who is assessing it or accessing it and how it's being used?
Simple answer is go contact our OPA, which is run by Brandon Davis. Have a conversation with him about that. That's a complicated question, and we're trying to do speed dialing here. So that's the simple answer. Talk to OPA.
Office of Public Accountability is
Yeah.
that office. Another question from Reddit. And we've talked about this one quite a bit. When are we going to prioritize affordable housing?
Starting 6 months ago when I became mayor, like this is my number one thing, is getting affordable housing.
Some of the things you've done since.
Well,
started?
like I said, if we can drive down costs of construction, and that's a permitting thing, and permitting is the government, right? Like I can't affect the price of 2x4s, but I can affect how many times you have to go to planning to ask permission. I can affect things like parking requirements, and so I can't affect how easy or how hard it is to make an ADU, which really feeds into affordable housing, right? Like if I can make something cheap, I can rent it cheap. So that's a big issue. Now, as far as subsidizing housing, most of that is done at the federal and state level. So we don't really do subsidizing per se. Now we can offer incentives to developers, but and we certainly do. We do this all the time. So a lot of our developments are, but again, they're tracking federal incentives. So there's a program called LIHTC, for example. Well, that's all federal criteria, and it gets us affordable housing. And our development office can make that as easy as possible for those developers, and we do. But what we can do is deal with the city regulatory environment, and we can also then help people think of new ideas and create new pathways. So my example, I've been talking to banks, and I need to do more talking about how do we really get a really obvious, clear way for people to be able to borrow money so they can build an ADU, because that's mom and pop. I mean, the nice thing about that is, again, it's not a big developer, right? It's not a $1 billion project. It's like something somebody did in their backyard, which brings them into the ownership society, gives wealth, creates more neighbors in a neighborhood, gives you great landlord-tenant relationships because they're in the, it's the person in your backyard, so it's building community. It's ticking off so many of those boxes, but getting to 800 from 8, I'm convinced will get us. So really cool, attractive cities. Minneapolis, Austin, both saw rents go down last year because they've had a lot of new units come into play in those cities, and enough that it starts driving rent prices down.
I've stayed in a really cool ADU in Minneapolis, so I know specifically. Another question from Reddit is, what is the city doing to address the climate crisis?
Great question. So I am actually leaving here to go to a meeting about whether we can start a green revolving fund in Grand Rapids, which is a fund that we would use to sort of prime the pump on people taking energy action that could get us energy efficiency. We are talking about how we can do more solar, more renewable energy, talking about all that all the time. As a matter of fact, the City Commission is going to have a conversation at our next meeting about what are 20 things that we are willing to commit to right now, specific things that we think are going to help us with the climate crisis, but also help us with adaptability and also help us just live in a better environment. So it's not all, helping monarch butterflies doesn't directly relate to the climate crisis, but I want more pollinators in the world. Like, it's a thing that we're losing pollinators, right? So that's an environmental thing that doesn't directly relate to carbon, but it's, I want to make it easier to have people be able to do native plantings in town. So some of it drives very directly to the climate change problem. Some of it doesn't, but we are going to be talking about that at our next meeting. I spent a bunch of this morning, just going over my list of what are the most feasible things, what are the most important things, what can we do? So we're going to, tune into our next City Commission meeting. I hope we're going to have a good discussion about it.
Cool. Another question from Reddit. What can the city do to activate the street level for more walkability and more mass transit accessibility?
So much. For one thing, we could instead of having the few instant on flasher pedestrian crosswalks we got, we could get to I'd love it if we had 1,000 or 10,000. I would love to have an instant on flasher basically on every block in my world, and I also would like a lot of mid-block crosswalk opportunities, because that's where actual pedestrians actually want to cross, so they can see where the cars are, so they don't get into accidents. So pedestrians really like crossing in the middle of the block. We need more mid-block crossers. We can also raise intersections, because that makes it way more pedestrian accessible and pedestrian safe, and it kind of signals to cars that they should pay attention. We really need to start building out a real bike commuting infrastructure in a way that makes people feel safe, in a way that is visible, in a way that is coded so it actually can be used. So I biked from, I'm one of the owners of Long Road over on Leonard, and I live in Heritage Hill. Me and my wife and my daughter biked from Heritage Hill to Long Road the other Saturday night for dinner. It was great. But we went up Seward. That was the first time I noticed, oh, somebody painted a white line along here. I guess that must be a bike lane, but it's not really obvious that it's a bike lane. There's no rubber barriers in there separating. There's no signage. We could paint it green. Like, there are lots of things we could do for the bike lanes we already have to make them a lot more obvious. We also so that's one of the other things is we all got to participate. The more people are out there doing it, the more cars will get used to expecting bikes. The more they'll get used to expecting pedestrians, and so we've got to. You don't want to cede the space out of fear. Now, so it's both. We got to make it safer. But we also got to activate and get a world where cars expect that they are not the rulers of the world, that you don't have some special status in society because you bought a big piece of metal. Like, that does not give you extra rights on the roads as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say some staff from the Community Media Center were in Boston last week, and their bike infrastructure
so far ahead of us. It's
really
not
good.
Perfect, but it's, oh my gosh.
And I was like, oh, that's what a bike lane looks like.
Oh yeah, like, so I was on a bridge in Boston, and just for fun, I counted, and there were more bikes crossing the bridge than cars. Major bridge across the Charles. Like, but again, it's also adoption. Like, when you see a bike in Boston, you don't think, what's that weirdo doing? Because there's 20 other bikes behind him, right? So we've got to get to a critical mass stage. But people got to see it to believe it, right? Which is one of the reasons why I am biking everywhere now, so people can see me bike everywhere. And I still get funny. The other day I was at a meeting, and someone knew that I biked there because I put my helmet down, and they said, "Oh, I could have given you a ride," and I was like, and then I would have been here without a vehicle. Like, I biked on purpose. And then another day, one of my staff members was with me at a meeting in Aquinas. I got back downtown on my bike faster than she got back downtown in her car. Like, one of the reasons I bike is it's actually faster in the city 9 times out of 10. Anyway, so I could talk all day about this, but there's so much to do. But I feel like a kid in a candy shop on this issue. Like, there's so much for us to do, so many exciting possibilities, and we also got to get away from having the people doing the design work who aren't doing it. So if you build for pedestrians but you're not walking places, you're going to build it wrong. If you're building for bikes and you're not doing it, you're going to put them in the wrong place. You're going to do the wrong design. So we need people. We need more lived experience in the design world, because I see things all the time. I'm like, why did somebody do that to me? Why did you do that? That made it harder for me to bike. Like, I don't know. I'm sure you meant well, but that was the wrong thing to do. So sorry. Next question.
That's okay. The next question. This person is someone who walks to and from work. They're a pedestrian. Kai is their name. On my way, I have to cross a busy street, and in the afternoons, the cars parked on the road make it difficult for me to see traffic and for drivers to see me. Who should I talk to get a flashing crosswalk or something put in to make it safer for pedestrians to cross?
So that is a great question. First of all, you should call the city and request it. Second of all, I'm hoping to build a way that neighborhood associations can start sort of nominating their neighborhood. Like, hey, can we have a 4-way stop here? Hey, can we have a flashing crosser here? The other thing is, I'm working on the affordability question. I was just in Halifax, Nova Scotia. They've got a lot of solar-powered instant-on flashers. Well, the thing about that is you don't need to pull lines to them, right? Way less costly. So I'm trying to cost those out so we can start doing those here. The other thing that is, if you're crossing a busy street, like, we got to start asking ourselves, why do we have so many cars parked on busy streets? Because when I pull out, and this is my neighborhood, when I pull out onto Wealthy or Cherry in a car, I'm kind of taking my life in my hands. It's roughly like playing Russian roulette. I'm like, well, I can't see around all these cars. I guess I'm going to try to get out on Wealthy or Cherry and see what happens. That happens to me all the time. Now, if they weren't rows of parked cars on Wealthy and Cherry, pulling out from the street you live on or the street I live on wouldn't feel like I was playing Russian roulette in a car. So I think we need to and the other part of the problem is, like, pickup trucks with tinted windows are taller than me, so you can't see across them, right? So we can't solve the trend of everyone wanting, it feels like one of these days we're going to get to the point where everyone's driving things that are 12 feet tall so that they can see over the things that are 11 feet tall. It's kind of this, like, a one-upsmanship thing, right? Like, I wished everyone just drove sedans, because there aren't a lot of people in my neighborhood who need a pickup truck to bring feed to their farm. Most people seem to drive pickup trucks because it's part of their, like, image of how they want to look in the world. They're not using the beds a lot, but that's another story.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you to our guest, Mayor LaGrande, for coming in and sharing your insight. And thank you to all of you at home for tuning in and sending in your questions. Don't forget, you can always watch rebroadcasts of this program throughout the month of July on Cable GRTV's Channel 25 or the GRTV YouTube page. See you next month, Grand Rapids.